The synchronized combat drums of Station Perseus thundered through every corridor, marking the most important day of the year. Elite Assessment Day. The day when young warriors proved their worth or lost their honor forever. Commander Zar'eth's scaled hand slammed against the arena viewer, activating the display that should have shown his 3 cubs in perfect combat formation. The screen flickered to life, revealing an empty circle. No cubs. No weapons drawn. Nothing. His roar shattered the observation glass. Seal the station. The command echoed through the military complex, making even the bravest warriors step back. My cubs are missing. 3 decks below, in Botanical Wing C, Dr. Lily Ashworth couldn't hear any of the chaos above. She had her earbuds in, playing old earth folk music while she worked with her beloved flowers. The crown lilies were blooming beautifully today, their petals naturally weaving together in patterns that reminded her of the friendship bracelets she'd made as a child. Her apron pockets felt heavier than usual this morning. Must have grabbed extra seed packets, she thought, adjusting the straps across her shoulders. A soft rustling came from the crown lily section, followed by what sounded like giggling. Those ventilation systems, Lily muttered to herself, returning to her pH testing. Always making strange noises. In her left pocket, 7-year-old Thorn pressed his scaled face against the soft fabric, finally finding relief from the terrible combat drums. The botanical wing was different from the rest of the station. Here, the gentle hum of grow lights, the bubble of the irrigation systems, and the whisper of air through leaves created a peaceful symphony that blocked out the harsh military sounds. In her right pocket, his sister Sage had curled into a tight ball, her small claws carefully holding 3 purple flowers she'd selected for their crown. Their youngest sibling, River, was tucked behind a particularly large crown lily plant, tiny hands working to weave white petals with pink ones. They discovered Dr. Lily's garden 3 weeks ago, during one of their mandatory combat training sessions. While their instructor screamed about honor and violence, they caught a scent on the recycled air, something sweet and alive and completely different from the metal and sweat of the training halls. Following their sensitive noses, they'd found paradise. Before we continue, I should mention that YouTube shows me that 93% of you haven't subscribed yet. Subscribing is free, it really helps our community grow, and I'd love for you to be part of our family. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I love hearing from viewers across the galaxy. Now back to our story. Lieutenant Kyvier rushed into the empty arena behind her commander, her bioscanner sweeping the area. Sir, their scent trail leads everywhere and nowhere. The ventilation has dispersed it. They wouldn't abandon assessment, Zar'eth growled, his luminescent spines flashing red with shame and fear. 12 generations of my family have been elite warriors. My cubs would never. Security teams reporting in, Kyvier interrupted, pressing her earpiece. Training halls clear. Armory secured. Command deck negative. Medical bay empty. What about the botanical wing? Someone suggested. Zar'eth's spines darkened. My cubs are warriors. They would never hide in a garden of weakness. Besides, the security chief added, checking his scanner, Botanical is automatically sealed during assessments. It's classified as non-essential. The biosignatures are all scrambled in there anyway from the plant life. Up in the observation deck, other elite families watched with a mixture of shock and secret satisfaction. The mighty Zar'eth's lineage, the family that had produced the deadliest warriors for 12 generations, had cubs who fled from assessment. Deserters, someone whispered. Cowards, another added. Their bloodline has gone soft. Down in the garden, Lily pulled her earbuds out to better concentrate on a particularly delicate hybrid she was developing. That's when she heard it, a tiny voice whispering. Purple for strength, white for peace, pink for pretty? She turned slowly, not wanting to startle whatever was making that sound. There, among her crown lilies, sat 3 small Krillian cubs. Each one was carefully weaving flowers into circular patterns, their deadly claws retracted and gentle as they handled the delicate petals. The largest cub, Thorn, had created a crown with a sturdy base of woody stems, architecturally perfect and surprisingly beautiful. Sage, the middle one, had color-coordinated her crown with mathematical precision. Each flower chosen for a specific meaning from the botanical guides Lily had posted around the garden. River, the smallest, was creating something that shouldn't have been possible, a delicate weaving so intricate that it looked like lace made of living flowers. Lily's breath caught in her throat. These weren't just any cups. The bioluminescent patterns on their scales, the distinctive head ridges, these were Commander Zar'eth's children. The ones who should be in combat assessment right now, fighting for their family's honor. "Hello," she said softly, using the same gentle voice she used with scared animals. All three cubs looked up, their golden eyes wide with fear. But they didn't run. River, the smallest, held up the crown she'd been making. "We made you one too, garden lady." Lily's botanical training kicked in immediately. Observe, assess, don't make sudden movements. These were elite warrior cubs trained from birth to fight. Even at their young age they could seriously hurt her if they felt threatened. But they didn't look threatening. They looked happy. "These are beautiful," Lily said, slowly kneeling down to their level. "How did you learn to make them?" "We watched your teaching videos," Sage explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "You said flowers have language. They speak without hurting." "Combat only says hurt," River added, her small voice breaking slightly. "Always hurt. Wake up, train, hurt. Sleep to hurt more tomorrow." Thorn, trying to be the brave oldest sibling, showed Lily his hands. They were covered in calluses and training scars, marks that no 7-year-old should have. "Making beauty doesn't hurt. First time our claws create instead of destroy." The sound of approaching boots made all four of them freeze. Security was coming. "Dr. Ashworth," Lily heard through the garden door. "Security sweep. We're checking all sections." Lily made a decision that would change everything. She grabbed 3 botanical survey cloaks from her equipment wall, special covers that blocked biosignatures to prevent contamination during sensitive plant studies. She wrapped each cub carefully, and they blended perfectly with the foliage. "Stay still," she whispered. "Keep weaving your crowns." The door opened and Lieutenant Kyvier entered with 2 security officers, their scanners sweeping the garden. "Dr. Ashworth, have you seen anything unusual?" Lily gestured at her hybrid flowers, keeping her voice calm and professional. "Just the usual miraculous beauty of nature. These crown lilies are developing a fascinating symbiotic relationship with the atmospheric processors." Kyvier's scanner beeped near the lily section, but she dismissed it. "Plant life always interferes with our equipment. You haven't seen the commander's cubs." "I've been alone here all morning," Lily said, technically not lying since she'd only just discovered them. "Working on my hybridization project." The security team left, and 3 small heads peeked out from under the cloaks, flower crowns slightly askew but still intact. "You saved our art," Sage whispered, her golden eyes shining with tears. "You saved us," River corrected, clutching her crown like a lifeline. Before Lily could respond, the garden door burst open with such force that several hanging plants swayed. Commander Zar'eth stood in the entrance, his massive frame filling the doorway, his biospines fully extended in a threat display that would make most enemies surrender immediately. His predator eyes locked onto his cubs, taking in the flowers, the crowns, the gentle way they held their creations. "You." His voice was a growl that made Lily's human instinct scream danger. "You abandoned your assessment. For flowers?" The cubs didn't cower. Instead they stood slowly, still holding their crowns. Thorn stepped forward, placing himself between his father and his siblings. "Not flowers, father. Art." Zar'eth's rage seemed to stutter, like a machine suddenly missing a gear. He stared at River's crown and something shifted in his expression. The pattern she'd woven, he'd seen it before. Decades ago, before his warrior training began, his mother had made him something similar. The memory hit him like a physical blow. His mother's garden, destroyed when he was 8 to make room for another training facility. The crown she'd made him for his naming day, burned because warriors didn't keep such soft things. "That pattern," he said, his voice rough. "How do you know that pattern?" "It called to me," River said simply. "The flowers wanted to be woven this way." Lily stepped forward, showing no fear despite every instinct telling her to run from the apex predator in her garden. "Commander, watch your cubs work. Really watch them." She pointed out the details he'd missed in his anger. Thorn's engineering of the stems, creating a structure that was both beautiful and incredibly strong. Sage's strategic color placement, each flower positioned for maximum visual impact while maintaining structural integrity. River's impossible precision, her young claws doing work that most adult craftsmen couldn't achieve. They're using the same skills you taught them for combat, Lily explained. Precision, patience, strategy, focus. But they're creating instead of destroying. Creation requires more control than destruction, Commander. Your cubs aren't abandoning their training, they're transcending it. We're still strong, Thorn said, his young voice steady. Strong enough to be gentle. Warriors don't make beauty, came a mocking voice from the doorway. Other elite families had followed Zar'eth, drawn by the scandal. Commander Thrix, Zar'eth's biggest rival, stood there with a sneer on his face. Zar'eth's bloodline ends in petals and shame. River did something then that nobody expected. She carefully removed her flower crown, set it gently aside, and executed a perfect combat form, one that most adult warriors couldn't master. Her movements were fluid, deadly, precise. Then she stopped, picked up her crown and placed it back on her head. Beauty doesn't weaken, she said calmly. We choose both paths. Warriors who create. Sage stepped forward, her tactical mind already working. Gardens need defending. Understanding plants means understanding biological warfare. Knowing what heals means knowing what harms. Thorn nodded, adding his own insight. Building crowns teaches patience for long sieges. Weaving flowers trains fingers for delicate explosive work. Everything connects. Zar'eth looked at his cubs, really looked at them. For the first time in weeks, they weren't exhausted. Their eyes were bright, their postures relaxed but ready. They were happy. The elite families waited for his response. Tradition demanded he drag them to assessment, force them to fight, maintain the family honor. But looking at River's crown, so similar to his mother's work, something long buried stirred in his warrior's heart. Commander Zar'eth, feared across 3 solar systems, who had never lost a battle or shown weakness, did something unprecedented in elite military history. He knelt in the garden and asked, "Can you teach me to make one?" The silence was deafening. Elite commanders didn't kneel. They certainly didn't ask to learn flower weaving. Several of the watching families actually stepped back in shock. River's face lit up like a sunrise. She immediately gathered flowers, her small hands selecting each one carefully. These are for you, Father. Orange for courage, blue for wisdom, red for strength that protects instead of destroys. As she showed him how to weave the stems, her tiny claws guiding his massive ones, other cubs began creeping out from behind their parents. They'd been watching, curious but afraid to show interest. Can we learn too?" asked a small Altarian chick, her feathers rustling nervously. Thorn and Sage immediately made space, sharing their flowers. Within minutes, the garden had transformed from a confrontation into a classroom. Elite cubs who'd been trained to see each other as competition were working together, sharing techniques, helping when someone's crown fell apart. 1 week later, the garden had become an official training ground. Lily stood before a mixed class of elite cubs and their parents, teaching what she called botanical strategy. When plants compete for sunlight, she explained, pointing to her various specimens, they don't always fight directly. Sometimes they grow around obstacles. Sometimes they support each other to reach higher. Nature teaches us there are many ways to win. Thorn had become her star assistant, showing other cubs how root systems resembled supply lines in military campaigns. Sage explained how flowers communicated through chemical signals, just like troops in the field. River demonstrated how pollination was really about building alliances and mutual benefit. Commander Zar'eth, still uncomfortable but trying, wore a simple crown during non-combat hours. It had started as support for his cubs, but he'd noticed something strange. His tactical planning had improved. The patience required for weaving translated into patience during long strategic sessions. The gentle focus needed to handle delicate petals had somehow improved his precision with weapons. The data was undeniable. Training assessments showed that cubs participating in garden training had 40% better tactical scores, 50% improvement in patience testing, and 70% fewer stress-related medical incidents. "You've militarized gardening," Admiral Vex said during a senior staff meeting, his 4 eyes studying the reports. "No," Lily corrected gently. "I've shown that cultivation and combat aren't opposites. They're complementary. A warrior who knows how to create understands what they're protecting. But not everyone was convinced. Commander Thrix, representing the traditional military faction, demanded proof. If these flower-wearing cubs are so capable, let them demonstrate. Real combat, full contact. But they must wear their precious crowns throughout. If the crowns survive, this garden nonsense continues. If not, we return to proper warrior training. The cubs accepted immediately. The combat demonstration drew every elite family on the station. The arena was packed as Thorn, Sage, and River entered, wearing their standard combat armor but also their flower crowns, carefully secured but visible. Their opponents were 3 older cubs from Thrix's family, traditionally trained, hungry to prove the superiority of pure warrior culture. The fight began, and immediately it was clear something was different. The garden-trained cubs didn't fight with the usual aggressive style. They were defensive, protective, using the environment rather than direct assault. They moved like water around attacks, bending but not breaking. Thorn used his architectural understanding to predict his opponent's movements, building his defense like he built his crowns, with patience and structure. Sage fought strategically, using misdirection and tactical retreats, treating the battle like a garden that needed different approaches for different seasons. River moved with impossible grace, her combat as delicate and precise as her flower weaving. Throughout the entire fight, their crowns remained intact. The final moment came when River had her opponent pinned, her training blade at his throat. Victory was hers. But instead of the traditional victory humiliation, she did something unprecedented. She helped him up and placed a small flower crown on his head. Victory isn't just defeating, she said to the stunned arena. It's knowing when not to. Strength that only destroys eventually destroys itself. Strength that creates builds forever. The council was speechless. Commander Thrix himself looked shaken. The cubs had won decisively, but more importantly, they'd shown a different way of winning. 3 weeks into the new garden protocol, real disaster struck. Void Raiders, the most feared pirates in the sector, attacked Station Perseus during a shift change when defenses were weakest. The emergency alarm sent most cubs to panic shelters, but the garden-trained cubs responded differently. They reported to their posts wearing their combat armor with flower crowns attached to their helmets, a sight that made the raiders laugh. They stopped laughing quickly. Thorn used his botanical knowledge to weaponize the station's plant life. The decorative thorn vines in the main corridor became a trap when he activated their rapid growth cycle, creating an impenetrable barrier that caught 3 raiders. His understanding of plant structure let him predict exactly how they'd grow and where they'd be most effective. Sage deployed spore clouds from the fungi in the waste processing garden, creating a natural smoke screen that disabled the raiders' thermal vision. Her strategic mind, trained by planning garden layouts, had already predicted 3 different attack routes and prepared botanical defenses for each. River led a group of younger cubs in using bioluminescent plants as a communication system when the raiders jammed standard comms. The subtle light patterns, inspired by how flowers attracted pollinators, let them coordinate defense without technology. But it was in the greenhouse that the most remarkable event occurred. Lily had transformed her botanical wing into an emergency medical center. The healing plants she'd been cultivating proved more effective than synthetic medicines for treating blast wounds. The garden-trained cubs showed remarkable calm under fire, their crown-weaving meditation training keeping them focused despite the chaos. When wounded raiders were brought in alongside injured station personnel, the cubs treated both with equal care, using the same plant-based medicines. River sang softly while applying plant salves, a technique she'd learned from listening to Lily hum while gardening. The songs seemed to calm the wounded, reducing their need for sedatives. One raider, barely conscious, grabbed River's arm. "What are you?" he whispered. "Warriors who grow," she answered simply, continuing to tend his wounds. When the battle ended, the station had suffered minimal casualties. The raiders who survived were shocked by their treatment. They'd expected torture or execution, not children bringing them flower crowns and plant-based medicine. The raider captain, defeated and confused, asked Zar'eth, "Your cubs fight like warriors but heal like saints. How?" It was Sage who answered. "Same hands, different choice." Admiral Vex reviewed the battle footage and made a station-wide announcement. The Garden Protocol is now mandatory training for all military families. What we witnessed today wasn't just victory, it was evolution. Lily was promoted to Strategic Botanist, a position created specifically for her. The cubs were officially designated as the first warrior gardener unit, a new classification that recognized their dual nature. The transformation of Station Perseus happened gradually, then suddenly. Within 2 months, every corridor had some form of garden. Warriors tended plants during off-duty hours, finding that the gentle work improved their combat focus. The mess hall began serving vegetables grown in the station gardens, and somehow knowing they'd grown their own food made the warriors feel more connected to what they were protecting. Other military stations sent representatives to observe. They arrived skeptical and left converted, usually carrying small potted plants and instruction manuals written jointly by Lily and the cubs. The real change became clear during the next blooming festival. What had traditionally been purely a combat tournament now included garden competitions. Warriors who'd spent their lives destroying now competed to create the most beautiful arrangements, the most efficient growing systems, the most innovative botanical defenses. Thorn, Sage, and River served as judges for both the combat and gardening events. They moved between the two with easy confidence, evaluating a fighting technique one moment and a flower arrangement the next, seeing no contradiction between the skills. Their own garden won the Strategic Beauty Award, a landscape that was both defensively perfect and stunningly beautiful. They demonstrated how every plant placement served a dual purpose: beauty and protection, peace and preparation. During their combat demonstration, they fought while maintaining perfect flower crowns, showing that gentleness and strength weren't enemies but allies. When representatives from other stations asked how they managed this balance, it was Thorn who explained. A warrior who only knows how to destroy is like a garden with only thorns, protected but lifeless. A garden with only flowers is beautiful but vulnerable. We choose to be both. 6 months after that first failed assessment, the transformation was complete. Lily and Zar'eth stood together as co-directors of the new Garden Combat Academy. The curriculum was revolutionary: morning combat training, afternoon botany, evening crown meditation. Students learned that discipline meant both the strength to fight and the patience to wait for seeds to grow. The cubs, now 8 years old, led advanced classes. Thorn taught structural beauty, showing how engineering principles applied to both fortifications and flower arrangements. Sage led strategic gardening, demonstrating how botanical knowledge enhanced battlefield tactics. River offered the art of gentle strength, teaching meditation through crown weaving and how inner peace improved combat performance. But perhaps the most remarkable change came from an unexpected source. The raider captain they defeated and healed sent a message. His crew had given up piracy. They now protected trade routes, specifically the ones that supplied seeds and plants to military stations adopting the garden protocol. Your cubs showed us that warriors could choose what to protect instead of what to destroy, his message read. We choose to protect beauty now. The evening of the blooming festival, as the station's lights dimmed to simulate sunset, thousands of warriors gathered in the main garden. Each one carried flowers from their homeworld, contributing to a massive communal crown-making ceremony. Zar'eth wore an elaborate crown that Lily had made for him, while she wore one he'd created, neither perfect, but both made with genuine care. The cubs' original crowns, somehow still blooming thanks to Lily's hybrid preservation technique, were displayed in places of honor. As everyone wove their crowns together, stories emerged. Warriors spoke of how gardening had helped them process combat trauma. Parents shared how teaching their cubs to tend plants had brought their families closer. Young cubs talked about feeling proud of creating rather than just destroying. River stood up, her small voice carrying across the garden. Some people say warriors shouldn't wear flowers. But flowers are strong. They grow through concrete, survive storms, come back after winter. If that's not warrior strength, what is? The crowd cheered and the crown weaving continued. By full darkness, everyone wore flowers, some elaborate, some simple, all meaningful. Later that evening, in the quiet of the original garden where it all began, Lily sat with the cubs, teaching the newest students. These were young elite cubs, nervous about their first crowns, worried about being seen as weak. River knelt beside the smallest, a tiny Krillian girl who reminded her of herself just months ago. "It's okay if it falls apart," River said gently. "Gardens teach us that nothing stays the same. Things grow, change, sometimes die, then grow again. That's not failure, that's life." The little girl nodded, carefully placing a blue flower next to a yellow one. "Does it make me less of a warrior?" she whispered. Thorn answered, his voice warm with understanding. "It makes you more of everything. Warrior, artist, protector, creator. Why be one thing when you can be all things?" Sage added her tactical perspective. "The strongest defense has multiple layers. We're not replacing our warrior training, we're adding to it. More tools, more options, more ways to win." Lily watched her cubs, because that's how she thought of them now, as hers in the way that all teachers claim their students, and felt deep satisfaction. They'd grown so much, not just in size but in wisdom. Zar'eth entered the garden, no longer the harsh commander who'd burst in months ago. He moved carefully around the plants, his warrior's grace adapted to avoid disturbing the flowers. He carried a data pad showing the latest reports from other stations adopting the garden protocol. "Zero combat stress casualties this month," he announced. "Highest morale ratings in Perseus station history. And 3 more military academies requesting our curriculum." But more important than the statistics was what Lily saw in his eyes when he looked at his cubs. Pride, yes, but also peace. He'd learned what they'd always known, that strength wasn't about hardness but about choosing when to be hard and when to be soft. As the evening grew late, the cubs helped the younger ones finish their first crowns. Some were lopsided, others fell apart immediately, but each attempt was celebrated. The garden filled with laughter, a sound that would have been unthinkable in a military facility just months ago. "Lily teacher," Sage asked, using the title all the cubs had adopted for her, "our first crowns still bloom?" "How?" Lily smiled, touching the preserved flowers that had started everything. "Beauty sustained with love lasts longer than beauty forced to exist. Your crowns bloom because you tend them, not because they're naturally eternal." "Are we warriors or gardeners?" asked one of the new students, confusion clear in his voice. It was Zar'eth who answered, his deep voice gentle. "You're proof that we need not choose. The galaxy is vast enough for warriors who plant and gardeners who protect." A message came through on Lily's communication device. Another military station reporting success with their first crown ceremony. She shared it with the group and the cubs cheered. Their revolution was spreading, one flower at a time. "Father wears crowns to military council now," River announced proudly. "The council wears them too," Zar'eth admitted with what might have been embarrassment if it wasn't accompanied by a small smile. "Admiral Vex has become particularly skilled at orchid arrangements." As the night cycle began and young cubs started yawning, the garden slowly emptied. But Lily, Zar'eth, and the 3 cubs who'd started it all remained, sitting among the crown lilies where the revolution had begun. "Do you ever regret missing that assessment?" Lily asked them. Thorn shook his head immediately. "That assessment would have tested who they wanted us to be. This," he gestured at the garden, the crowns, the entire transformed station, "let us discover who we actually are." "We didn't fail our assessment," Sage added with strategic precision. "We created a new one." River, the youngest and perhaps wisest, summed it up perfectly. "We learned that the same hands trained to destroy could create something beautiful enough to make the galaxy bloom." Lily pulled out her journal, the one where she'd been documenting this entire journey, and wrote, "Today a young warrior asked me if flowers could grow in space. I told him they already do, they're just shaped like cubs sometimes. And sometimes, those flower-shaped cubs grow up to teach the universe that strength has many blossoms." The station's night cycle had fully engaged now, dimming most lights to simulate Earth-normal darkness. But the garden glowed softly with bioluminescent flowers, a project River had started to make the garden beautiful even in darkness. "It's like the stars came down to live with us," a passing maintenance worker commented, pausing to admire the view. And he was right. The garden had become a galaxy of its own, each glowing flower a small star, each crown a constellation of possibility. Months later, when military historians documented the transformation of warrior culture in the Perseus sector, they would mark this moment, 3 cubs choosing flowers over fighting as the turning point. Not a battle won or a treaty signed, but children making beauty in a place designed only for hardness. But that night, in the soft glow of the garden, it was simpler than history. It was just a botanist and a warrior commander, watching their cubs teach other children that strength could bloom in countless ways. The revolution hadn't been televised or broadcast across the galaxy. It had been woven, one flower at a time, by small hands that refused to accept that creation and protection couldn't exist in the same warrior's heart. The final entry in Station Perseus's log that day read, "Garden operational. Crown ceremony successful. Tomorrow's schedule includes both combat training and flower arrangement. All cubs are reminded that strength blooms in many forms." But in the margin, someone had added in small, careful script, a child's handwriting that looked suspiciously like Rivers. "The garden lady who caught us making crowns instead of wars saved more lives with her flowers than most generals do with their strategies. She taught us that being strong doesn't mean being hard. It means being strong enough to be gentle when gentleness is needed." And in the garden of Station Perseus, as the galaxy spun on through space, 3 small crowns hung in places of honor, still blooming, still beautiful, still proof that sometimes the universe's greatest changes begin with the smallest acts of rebellion. Like choosing to make something beautiful in a world that only values destruction. Like being brave enough to weave flowers in a place that only teaches war. The cubs had started something that could never be stopped. Because once warriors learn they can create beauty, they never forget. Once children see that strength can be gentle, they carry that knowledge forever. And once a garden takes root in a military station, it spreads like the most wonderful weed, impossible to eliminate, transforming everything it touches. Years from now, when Thorn, Sage, and River led their own military units, they would be known not for their combat skills alone, but for the gardens that followed them. Every base they commanded would bloom. Every warrior they trained would know how to fight and how to grow. Every child under their protection would learn that the same hands could destroy and create, and that true strength lay in knowing when to do each. But that was the future. Tonight, in the present, 3 cubs who'd chosen crowns over combat sat with the human who'd protected their choice, in a garden that had become sanctuary, surrounded by the gentle glow of impossible flowers that grew in space because someone had dared to plant them. The transformation was complete. The revolution had bloomed. And somewhere in the garden, new seeds were already taking root, ready to spread the radical idea that warriors could be gardeners, that strength included softness, and that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was admit you'd rather make flower crowns than make war. In the military archives, the day 3 elite cubs chose flower crowns over combat assessment would be remembered as the moment warriors learned their greatest victory. Discovering that the same hands trained to destroy could create something beautiful enough to make the galaxy bloom. The garden was never empty now. There was always someone tending growth, someone learning to weave, someone discovering that they could be more than what tradition demanded. The revolution that started with 3 scared cubs hiding among flowers had become a movement that would reshape military culture across the stars. And in the heart of it all, the crown lilies continued to bloom, their petals naturally weaving together, showing everyone who looked that sometimes the most beautiful things happened when different elements chose to support each other rather than compete. The cubs had learned that lesson. The station had learned it. And slowly, one garden at a time, the galaxy was learning it too. Strength had many blossoms. And they were all beautiful.